Good afternoon to our folks over in Europe. Good morning to our attendees in the United States. It is 11 o'clock local time in the Eastern time zone. We will give folks a couple more minutes to trickle in and join us. So we will get started. Just hang tight. Thanks. Hey, it is a couple minutes after 11 o'clock local time. And so we will go ahead and dive in and start our webinar for today. I already see there's a question in the Q&A. Great question to kick off with. This will be recorded and we will share the link out after the session for people for future reference and to share with friends, colleagues, whomever you like. So yes, the link, recording link will be shared with you. So yes, welcome to our first webinar from Lytho in 2023. Today, we are going to be talking about a quick recap, what we learned about the creative industry in 2022, and then looking ahead into 2023, what we anticipate directionally for our industry. My name is Sarah Tinsley. I am an enterprise customer success manager here at Lytho. I've been with the company on staff for about a year, but I was a customer for a couple of years before coming on board internally, and it has been an absolute pleasure to get to experience Lytho kind of on both sides of the coin. I'm joined today by Pete Skophammer. Pete is the manager of marketing operations and creative services at Children's Minnesota. I have the distinct privilege of working closely with Pete as his enterprise customer success manager, and I would be remiss if I didn't start off by thanking Pete for being an incredible strategic partner to the Lytho community internally and externally. You have been so generous with your time and your thoughts and your energy, and we are so appreciative of having you join us in this conversation today. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to start off with doing, before we dive into, what did we learn in 2022? What are we anticipating in 2023? Kind of wanted to kick off with more of a lighthearted question to set the scene and ask you, Pete, as we start looking back at 2022, is there a particular trend that you are ready to see retired?
Well, I feel like there's a lot of trends I would probably like to see retired. From an operations perspective, it's maybe not a trend, but it's the term, new normal is something that we've been using for quite a while since, really since the pandemic started. And even at the time, I never really loved that term because it sort of implied that we had a normal, and then we have a new normal, and there's really never normal. You know, things are always changing and things are always in flux. And what was odd about the pandemic is that it affected everybody at the same time. So there was sort of a shared chaos. But for most people in this business, there's something going on that's disrupting their normal activity. It could be you know, restructuring of their departments. It could be a new boss. It could be a new tool. It could be things going on in their personal life. So people are always going through these sort of monumental changes in their life. And so to think that, you know, we can go from this kind of happy place where things were settled to a new happy place where things are settled, I think doesn't really address the fact that we always need to grow and we need to adapt and we need to adjust. And we can't just say, oh, when we get to the new normal, everything is going to be great, because it's not, because the next thing is going to come up.
Yeah, I was at a conference, a creative operations conference recently, and a speaker was talking about this idea of creative chaos, that it's inherent to this industry, that there is always a need to be flexible, a need to make adjustments on the fly. I know we've spoken before that pivot is kind of a 4-letter word to us now. We're a little over talking about the new normal and pivoting, but it's relevant, and that chaos it's a constant in the industry that we serve. But it's not a bad thing necessarily. I think that chaos can really be a driver to unpredicted results. When you are put in a unique situation and given some boundaries or unexpected restrictions, it forces you, as we say, in and out of the office, to get creative, figure it out. And so I love that resonates so well with me, in that we are never going to be at a place where we feel like we are operating at 100% efficiency and we have all of the resources that we need and everyone is 100% aligned on the directions that we're going. I don't think that's super realistic. So I love that right off the bat, we have this tactical piece of just start. You have to start and then make the adjustments. Know where you're going, have an obvious intentional direction, but be ready to be flexible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There's never a perfect time, and that the new normal sort of implies that there's going to be a better time or a perfect time to make changes or to start improving your processes or to try to put some things in place that can make your workflows better or your processes better. And there just really isn't ever going to be a perfect time. You just need to start with what you've got now, and then just keep adapting as you go.
Yeah, we saw that starting to trend through the Q4 creative operations report. In 2022, Lytho did a 4-part series of creative operations reports, and we started to see in the Q4 that conversation coming up around reporting. You know, people weren't super comfortable in that reporting space yet to be able to have more factual conversations about how their creative teams are impacting bottom lines. But there was this idea of, this is really important to us. Reporting is very important, and we need to get started. We may not be experts. It's going to take us a minute to get to where we're really comfortable, but we need to dive in and at least just get started. So that's really already resonating with what we've learned in 2022 and how that's going to be, you know, a little bit of a driver for us moving into 2023. You know, as teams, something else we learned in 2022 was really, to me, quite a shocking figure of 75% of creative teams were restructuring, and that there was a need to streamline their operations, to become more strategic internally with their organizations. And so we saw in this ever-changing landscape that all of these teams were making adjustments, your team being one of them. If you could just quickly set the stage, if you wouldn't mind kind of recapping what that restructuring looked like for Children's Minnesota last year, kind of what the catalyst was, quickly what your process was, and then the results that you're seeing today.
Sure. Well, we had built up in our group sort of a project management led model you know, where the work really came through some project managers who owned the work, who owned the process, who own the steps, and and during the pandemic, we had a workforce reduction, and you know, we're a healthcare facility. We take care of sick kids, and we're really good at that. And so, whenever there's something like a healthcare reduction, you can figure that, you know, somebody like the marketing department or the folks in the marketing department might be impacted first, and of course we were. And then my team was impacted pretty heavily, so we lost some project managers. And so we had to adapt our processes and say, hey, we're still going to have to do a lot of work. There's still a lot of communication that happens right now. Yeah, and how do we set up a process where we leverage the folks that we do have and give them and empower them to make sure that the work keeps flowing? Because we don't want to get into a situation where projects are falling through the cracks, things are getting installed. So how do we work with our partners to help them be a part of the process and make sure that they're taking on some of those process roles that maybe we would have had a project manager handle in the past? So in terms of Lytho, what we did is we just expanded the access that we had given them. We gave them project management credentials so that they could go there and help us adjust timelines and do some of the things that we might have had a project manager do in the past. And then almost immediately after the workforce reduction, it was clear that we had to staff right back up again. So we rebuilt the department a little bit differently when we did finally get the head count back. And we sort of stuck to this model where there was almost like a triage phase where the work comes in. We sort of delegated to the right people, the marketing leads or the communication leads, and allow them to do a little bit more self-project management than we maybe would have done in the past. So we had to pivot a little bit in the way that we were doing things.
I love the stakeholder first approach that you take with your team. As Lytho moves into a kind of a creative operations space, that's really, creative operations might be kind of a new term for some folks. And ultimately for Lytho, that means really bridging the creative team and the stakeholders, improving the creative team's ability to partner with your stakeholders to deliver not just outputs, but impactful deliverables to the teams. And so as you're thinking through that stakeholder first approach, what would be some of the potential kind of fallouts or costs of not having had that mindset of really protecting that relationship?
Well, I think, you know, there's some business related things, and then there's some relationship things as well. I mean, a lot of it's so important to maintain those strong relationships. You know, you really want to have a good reputation within your organization, and taking care of your stakeholders is a big part of making sure that, you know, if there's a workforce reduction of some kind, you know, that there really is some pretty positive and strong feelings about your department. So you really want to make sure that you're developing really strong relationships within the organization. But there's also a factor, you know, our stakeholders are all working towards, as an organization, we have an overall strategy that we're trying to achieve, and we're all sort of in it together. And so our ability to help our stakeholders execute work that ladders up to our strategic objectives as an organization helps everybody. And one of the things that we're able to do is we can connect the dots. We might have an individual stakeholder who comes in with a project and doesn't know we've got another stakeholder over here who's got a project that some of the elements overlap or some of the objectives overlap. Maybe they've initiated a project that's for a specific channel. They're doing a video or something like that, and somebody else over here is making a website update. And, you know, as being sort of the hub for when the stakeholders come in with their projects, we can connect the dots on some of that work and make the sum of the parts, is better, than they are individually. And so we're able to do that and really take care of the stakeholders in that sense. We're able to make sure that they're successful in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, excellent. As I mentioned, is moving into 2023, Lytho is really focusing on better connecting creative teams and the stakeholders so that the creative teams have the ability to do the work that matters, to do the work that drives growth. And that's kind of this creative operations idea that we're really leaning into. You had mentioned before that you were exposed to creative operations kind of as a term, as a concept, and a previous role. Would you mind sharing that story again of kind of your first introduction to that creative operations concept?
Right. So I worked at the Best Buy there. Best Buy is a big Minneapolis-based company, and there was a big internal creative department there, marketing department, and there we didn't call it project management. It was called creative operations, and I had never heard that term. This was probably back in 2015 or so. We in this industry, we like to sort of embellish our department names and our titles and things like that, and give them kind of really fancy names. So I didn't think much of it at the time. I just thought it was one of those things that we were just giving it a cooler name. But as time has gone on, it really is clear that to call a team a project management or somebody as a producer or something like that doesn't really give them credit for everything that goes into the work. And I think that's one of the challenges that we face in creative operations, is really getting credit for everything that happens behind the scenes. Project management sort of assumes that you're assigned a project, it has a start date and end date, and then you clearly move on to the next thing. And that couldn't be farther from the way things actually happen. We're really accountable for the business as a whole, like sort of the execution of the business or the execution of the work. We're working on, digital asset management. We're helping with contracts. We're bringing in, freelancers. We're doing so much of the business that goes beyond project management that over the years I really warmed up to the term creative operations, and I think it's really a benefit because it gives people the credit in that area for what they're really doing, the scope of what they're doing.
I love that take. We hear a lot as a former designer, make things pretty, make it look nice. And we bring so much more, your creative teams bring so much more to really strategic goals and alignment. You have subject matter experts here, and it's so nice for them to be able to be pulled in, to be integral into that collaboration with your teams. Like you said, trying to point your stakeholders in the right direction. Your stakeholders aren't creative professionals. They don't always know what's the best deliverable type here. And so you guys having that strategic partnership, being able to guide them in the right direction is so valuable. And then for your leadership to see that, to acknowledge it, and to properly value the team that you've put together and the work that you're doing that ultimately impacts the greater business bottom line.
Right. And then I didn't think about the creatives as much at the time, but our creative team, they have as much to do with creative operations. They're not just designers. When we're kicking off a project, they've got the subject matter expertise, they've got the history, they've got the legacy knowledge. There's so much more that goes into what they do than just simply, acting as a designer or a copywriter or a videographer.
Yeah, we touched on it a little at the beginning when I was talking about that Q4 creative operations report that Lytho put out at the end of 2022. We saw that teams are really interested in reporting. Now that they've restructured, they want to validate the restructure, why they made those changes. And that's for conversations with leadership, but it's also just good for internal assessment. Did we make the right decisions? If we didn't, that's okay, but let's make a change. There's no shame in just continuing, like you said, to make adjustments to ensure that you're doing what's best for your team internally and externally. And so thinking kind of into now transitioning a bit into anticipating 2023, do you have an idea of some metrics or some data that you're keeping an eye on that you think will help you reflect back on that restructuring and how you can not necessarily define the success of it, but identify what's working and what's not?
Sure. I mean, capacity, volume is a big thing. I mean, we're not always the best at communicating volume. We just say things like, we're really busy right now. And so to be able to have some sort of data that explains that you are busy, and everybody's going to have a slightly different way of communicating that. And for us, we use projects. The way that we've got things set up in Lytho is we reserve campaigns for true campaign work, things that go over, extend over several months and have multiple facets to it that go on for a long time. But we might have something that seems like a single project that is maybe we've got an event where the kids, we've got maybe some professional athletes that are coming in to make an appearance with the kids. And so that might seem like one thing, but we generally will send out our photographer for that. We'll post it on social, we'll post it on our website. We might even post it on our intranet. And all four of those areas require input from different people. And so, I would treat that as 4 deliverables within a project. So the way we've sort of gotten around the counting of things is we've got a custom field called deliverables. And so so that's one project with 4 deliverables. So when I'm reporting back, we can say, here's the number of campaigns we have, here's the number of projects that we have going, and then here's the number of deliverables. And I know tasks can kind of work that way a little bit for us, but for us going in and just being able to plug in, 4 deliverables has really helped people understand that one simple project can be a lot more complicated than it seems. So we're able to use deliverables for that. So capacity is a really big part of the reporting that we do. Just making sure we get credit for the things that kind of happen in between the big projects. That's really, again, going back to making sure your team gets credit, because everybody has line of sight to the big campaigns or the big complex projects. People see those, but a lot of times they don't see the 10 projects that happen in between them. And so just making sure you get credit for them. The other thing would be we're able to pull reports. We've also got a custom field that talks about what is the strategic objective that this particular project lines up to. And so we can pull a report, we can do a comparison on what percentage of our work is laddering up to our strategic objectives and which percentage isn't, so that we can share that with leadership and to say, hey, we're getting a lot of work. We're tying up a lot of our time with things that don't necessarily line up with our strategic objectives. And there can be some conversations at the leadership level about the type of work that we're going to accept or decline when it comes in. And then we're also able to kind of break out the percentage of work by the different channels. We've got, video and social and PR internal, and we can look at like how much of our time is spent in each of those channels. So those are the kind of things that leadership wants to see. And if you can really put some numbers behind it, and you can kind of pick your own way to measure it, whatever makes sense for your organization. Yeah, you can get some tips in discussions like this, but for the most part, I think that you figure out what's going to resonate with your leadership, and then those are the type of reports that you want to pull.
Yeah, and you stress there is having the ability to collect that data and then assess, to be able to take it, to paint a fuller picture, to tell a better story about how impactful your team is, like we talked about at that greater company success level. What a great opportunity for you too to see that there's maybe some stress on your strategic alignment throughout the company, and for your creative team to step into that opportunity and say, you know what, we're going to own this. We're going to start tracking it. We're going to hold people accountable. That to me, I would think your leadership team is really impressed by that initiative, and you guys taking ownership to make sure that the company as a whole is really moving it toward that North Star, always moving in the right direction. That's incredibly valuable.
Right, and I think from a practical perspective too, there's a baseball term called wins over a replacement, I think is what it's called, WAR. And so what we can do, the other thing we can do is we can look at, here's what it took us to do it. Here's the time, here's the time we invested. Here's the product. Here's how many hours, and then how many weeks maybe something took. And then we could look at what would this have cost if we outsourced it. We've got a really simple way in our organization where we can kind of put the average. It's not salary, but the cost of an employee. We can pull that number from our finance or HR department and say, if we were billing back to somebody else for our services, what would be the break-even amount on that? And how does that compare to if we had hired somebody out, if we'd hired an agency to do this for us? So in a lot of ways, we're able to say, this is what we did. This is what it would have cost if we would have used an external agency to do this exact same thing. So that's another way that we can show value in a more practical way in terms of dollars.
Yeah, and that makes a ton of sense. Data is wonderful, but the more context you can provide makes it that much more powerful. So for, like I said, for you to be able to tell those broader stories about how your team, what all they have their hands in, really important. And so as we think through, again, kind of looking at 2023, we're halfway through January already, my goodness. We talked about, creative teams, battling for budgets and, with the restructuring going on, and we know moving into 2023, we have some economic uncertainty in that space. And so I'm curious, maybe just broadly, what your mindset going into 2023 is, just amid some economic uncertainty.
Right. I do. I think that's really important all the time. And it really doesn't, I think it doesn't matter what's going on around you. I think as a creative department, I always feel like there's more stress to prove your value. And I think that's just an ongoing thing. And, pulling numbers and again, comparing to like, this is what it would have cost to, if we were to have hired this out. And also just making sure, going back to getting credit for all of the work that you're doing and what would happen if we, if we weren't in place, what would leadership have to do in order to get this work done? And just being able to communicate that on a regular basis is really important. We run into issues with our, we have a single videographer and he's very good. And so he's in high demand, and we know that video is a medium that's there's an increasing need for it. And so we're out. There's always sort of a bit of a fight to get his time. And so we do something similar with that, where we explain to people what goes into. We have to explain to them what goes into making a video. And so when you've got a tool that has, we use templates. So if we accept a project and we've got a video, and it automatically has all the steps that go into it. So it's really easy for us to go back to a requester and say, this might seem like a simple project, but here's the steps that we take in order to get this done. And you can kind of put time against each of them. And so, when when people are saying, "Oh, can you just do this video for us?" we're able to show what the value of these videos are that we're doing, and make sure that we're choosing the right projects, we're accepting the right projects when they come in.
Yeah, that's great. We talked in prepping about this a little bit of that video conversation, how that is becoming like a very high demand deliverable. It reaches a wider audience. There's an expectation that it's going to improve engagement. So I guess I'm kind of curious what your take is on the video content. Is that the direction of the future? Do you think that's something we're going to see just a continued reliance on and request for moving into this year?
Absolutely, it's going to just keep evolving. These really short TikTok-y style videos are going to probably be the trend. Maybe next year, when we ask what trend we're looking forward to seeing go away, maybe it will be that. But these really sort of they're almost like micro edits of videos that are out there, and so I can see more of that happening. But people do, everybody sort of thinks, and this is, I think, one of the frustrations that creative teams have in general is when people come to you with the solution. You really want them to come to you with the problem, and have our strategic minded folks come back to them with a solution. And so often they come with tactics. I need a video, and so you really need to ask the questions. What are you trying to do, just to make sure that they really do need a video? And one of the places that we get a lot of requests for is internal teams feel like they need a video to explain maybe something in their department that will be used to communicate to other departments, folks in other departments. but we could have an audience of maybe 50. That could be our reach, would be 50 people. And if a video takes 50 hours to make and 50 people see it, it's probably not the best use of our time. So I think that the thing to be careful about with video is just not saying yes to everybody who asks for a video, but to be strategic and tactical about what you say yes to, and then your production level can change as well. You can raise the level of production for something that's going to be externally facing and get out to hundreds of thousands of people, and maybe do something a little bit simpler internally. So I think that that's really where kind of creative operations comes in, to be able to advise people on, okay, we can do a video, but this is what we recommend. This is the approach that we recommend taking.
Yeah. At what point during your kind of creative cycle are you having those conversations with your stakeholders? Are you guys collaborating ahead of time? Do they come to you? Do they fill out, a request form in Lytho, and then that collaboration happens? Kind of what does that process look like for you guys?
Right. So we've got marketing, marketing and communication leads on our team within our department, and they get it. They understand the value and the time that goes into it. And so if they're working with their their clinical areas or their the different service lines that we support, they're having those conversations up front, and usually we're not having to do a lot of filtering at that point. Usually that has been filtered. That's part of the planning. That's part of the relationship management. That's the account management that our leads, our marketing and communication leads, they take care of that. And that's usually with some of our bigger business areas that have higher volume of work, where it's high touch. Where we run into problems is we'll get requests. We also allow anyone in our organization can put in a request in Lytho. So everybody's got the ability to do that. So that's usually where we run into the problems, is that maybe somebody in some department somewhere just like, hey, I've got this great idea. We should do this. We should do this video. And then what we do is we call it a triage team. These requests come in, and we take a look at it, and we're like, we should talk to the marketing lead that's responsible for that area. So then we loop that person in, and they go back and have a conversation, and then they figure out, is this the right tool for them to do or not? So it can happen in both places. We love it when it happens in the planning phase, way up front. By the time it gets to be a request, there's just, you want to avoid that disappointment. People think that they want something, and you hate having to say no. And so if you can catch it before it even gets in, that's the best way to do it. But then there's also we sort of like to have a no but approach, or a yes but approach. Like, yes, we know that this is a great there's a need for you guys, but maybe this is a better solution for you. So we try to never just say, nope, sorry, we can't help you today.
That's smart. I love the respect you have for your stakeholders, like your appreciation for them, for meeting them where they are, not expecting them to be the experts, that you're having those honest conversations with them and bringing them into the creative life cycle, so that they really feel like they're a part of the creative process, that it's not an idea over here and then an execution over here, but that you guys are collaborating, really every step of the way. Again, nurturing that relationship, establishing a rapport of trust, so that they do come to you knowing, this is where we want to go with this. We trust that you guys are going to get us to the best outcome that we can get to. Really nurturing those stakeholder relationships, bringing down those silo walls. I think giving your creatives, or giving your stakeholders, a peek into the creative process helps them buy into it more. They have a better understanding, so there's less isolation, and again, more trust, which I think just gives you a better opportunity to be more successful.
Right. And we run into, we take care of sick kids. That's what we're really good at. That's what the staff is great at. If you go to a company, again, we're Minneapolis, so we've got Target, Best Buy, and General Mills. Pretty much, anybody that you would run into in the hallway probably has some sort of a marketing experience, whether they took some classes in college or they've had some roles in marketing. You're really getting products out there and you're selling them. That's why those organizations exist. And at Children's Minnesota, we exist to take care of sick kids. So for some of these folks, marketing is really not their comfort zone. So we do have to be patient and make sure we're really explaining things to them, because a lot of times, they'll see what another organization is doing and they'll be, I want one of those, or I want that. And so we've got some really smart marketing folks on our team that can explain, kind of how we're differentiated in the market and how, we take a different approach for these reasons. And then that kind of filters the type of work that comes in for us.
Yeah. We have a question from one of our attendees about that stakeholder relationship and nurturing. They ask, how has stakeholder feedback influenced or changed your processes?
That's a really great question. It was suggested at one time, and I think Lytho might have the capability to do this, but where you can generate like a little feedback form right after when you close out a project. There's a chance to provide feedback, and maybe I'm just making this up, Sarah, and Lytho can't do it. But we have talked about the idea that after a project closes out, we can send and solicit feedback. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. We don't do that yet, but their feedback is a huge part because of the fact that we're ultimately we exist in order to sort of fulfill the business objectives of these different groups. We really do try to adapt our style as well as we can, or adapt our approach to projects as well as we can based on their feedback. And it's not to say we don't ever want to get to a point where we're just order takers, but we do have to look at what we're trying to do as an organization and make sure we're setting things up in a way and we're adapting in order to meet their needs. And that might, some of the things that we've done, we've changed some of the way we route things in Lytho. We've added steps, if we know that, this is, we don't want to totally enable people, but we do know that some stakeholders may only interact with us a couple times a year, and to try to get them completely up to speed on Lytho might be a challenge. So we might have our marketing person is on the review. They might download the PDF and go talk to the stakeholder directly, or use a PDF, get that feedback and put it into Lytho themselves. So we've adapted to be able to accommodate the way that particular person works. So we really do take that feedback into account quite a bit.
Oh, we have a couple more questions rolling in. This is great. Are you able to do bandwidth and your resourcing forecasting? Do you use Lytho as a tool for that purpose?
That is our number one 2023 thing that we are working on. So we're not very good at that right now, and so we want to get better at it, because capacity planning is probably our kryptonite right now. We get so many last minute requests, as well as we try to plan for it. So much of what comes in is last minute requests, and then you're scrambling to prioritize every day, like what isn't going to get done today because this other thing came in. So how do we get ahead of that work a little bit better? So we are doing, the way that we're approaching it is our marketing and communication leads are really going all in on planning. They're doing a better job controlling what we can control. So we know, and again, in retail, back at Best Buy, we used to joke, like, oh my gosh, it's holiday again. How come we're not ready for it? It happens at the same time every year. And so it's sort of frustrating when the things that take you by surprise are the things that you should have been able to anticipate. So we really, that's one of the things, if we can get those into Lytho. I've got a story. We had a podcast. We do a podcast every month. And the person who does our podcast said that it was really a struggle for them a couple of years ago to wrangle that. But at the beginning of 2022, she just put it in for the month. She knew what the topics were going to be, or roughly were going to be. She assigned everybody to them, and then she just let it go. And they had, I think it was like something like a 45% increase in engagement with their podcast. And she felt that it was a lot of that was to do with Lytho. And so that was kind of capacity plan. And we knew this was coming, and we should be able to account for it. We can streamline that process. We've talked about maybe doing time tracking, which we don't really do very well right now, and everybody hates it. But I think in order to really understand how to do things, we want to find out how long it takes to do certain deliverables. We have all our designers and our writers, they work at different speeds. And so we have to kind of come up with an average. Like if this type of request takes this long. And so when we go into plan for the week, we can carve out the right amount of time for it. So right now we do it kind of manually. We are doing sort of an everyday agile type of check-in, but we are going to start using the functionality in Lytho. I think it's excellent. I think it's going to do exactly what we want it to do. We just haven't taken the time to use it yet.
Sure. I just received an internal note that I have been sharing that title slide this whole time, and Pete and I have been like little squares on the side. So I am so sorry to our attendees for not having a better grip on some logistics on this side, but hopefully you're still getting the great content here, even if my webinar hosting skills are a little rusty. So apologize for that. Appreciate everyone for bearing with us. What you were talking about, I love the way you approach, I've said this a couple of times, but stakeholders in general, but in this case, your internal stakeholders, your team, and how you use, you've said something before along the lines of using cold data to talk about people. And so I would love for you, if you wouldn't mind just kind of expanding on that a little bit, how you use, a tool that measures production success, how you use it to also successfully manage your team members.
Right. And so that kind of ties into that capacity question, because I think, one of the biggest causes of burnout, or, feedback that we get through engagement surveys is people who can't control their own workload or can't control their day. And so we don't want people burned out. We want people to feel, their mental and emotional well-being is legitimate of a concern as a physical one. We wouldn't, if somebody came in with a broken leg, we would do whatever we can to accommodate them. If they're 5 minutes late, we'd be like, well, you've got a broken leg, and we would set them up in a meeting in a certain way. We do a lot of things for them. If somebody, had an anxious night or we're going through some other things, we would make accommodations for that. So one of the things that we do is we just build that in. We want to be able to build in backup mechanisms so that if it needs to take a personal day or somebody needs to come in late for any reason, that they don't feel super stressed, like, oh, I'm gonna not come in. I'm gonna come in and all of the work I was supposed to be doing is going to be just waiting for me, and I'm going to be even more stressed out than I was before. So we're trying to build in some really healthy backups, so when people do have to take some time off, that they're just not inundated. It's just not kicking the can down the road, and it's going to overwhelm them when they get back. So that's a big important thing for us. The other thing is we've automated in Lytho a lot of our team assignments. So if a request comes in from a certain business area, we know it's going to be assigned to this marketing lead, and we know it's going to be assigned to this creative person and this project manager. And we have conversations ahead of time about how we divvy that work up, so we can kind of feel good about somebody isn't always doing production work, or somebody isn't always working with the most difficult clients. It's really easy as a person. I've got a project management background, and so I always know who's the person who's going to stay late for me, who's the person who's going to work over lunch for me, who's the person who's going to bail me out. And you keep going to the well so many times for those people that they end up getting burned out, or they end up getting burned out. So how do you make sure you're divvying the good stuff, the good projects, and the tough projects in a fair way? And you can do that as part of the intake process with the forms and the team assignments. But you can also look at, this is where you run reports on volume, like how many projects is one person handling versus another person. So some person might be a really high output person, and you're sort of inclined, and they might actually like to work that way. They might like to be busy all the time, and they just kind of have that personality. And you might have somebody else who's more of a noodler. They like to really kind of sit with something for a while, and it takes them a little bit longer to do things. And both styles are okay. But what you have to remember is that person that's going at that fast speed is going to only be able to do that for so long. They're going to need some sort of a break. So you just have to be able to build. You have to make sure. Sometimes when you go in and you look at projects that are behind, it's usually not usually, but it's often your best, one of your most productive people, because they just keep saying yes. And so sometimes you have to step in as a leader and say, no, the answer is no. You can't take that on. You've already got so much going on. And the data lets you do that. You can really look at, you can pull reports and you can just see it right there. Like, here's the work, here's what everybody's got working on. This person's got, this person doesn't have enough, and this person can probably pick up a little bit.
Yeah, I love that you embody your company really from top to bottom, and that you take care of people, and as an organization, you take care of children, but you as a leader take such good care of your teams. And I think that's really important, particularly as we move into this year of some unknowns. There's a little bit of maybe anxiety or unrest around maybe people's, comfort and their positions, how some economic impact could, trickle down to, the structure, a restructure. So I'm so appreciative. I'm so impressed at the approach you take to really nurturing your staff and taking really good care, like I said, of those internal and external stakeholders that you have. So not really a question there, more of just some praise for you. I think it's really, really important. And it does. I mean, hopefully it helps your team feel really empowered and safe, and that they're in a place where they can come and do their best work without feeling, some of those external unknown pressures.
Right. And I'll say that, that's our philosophy. That's our approach. We don't always do a great job at it. You do default to some behavior just to get through tough times sometimes, and you forget to look at the human element, and you overlook that, and you don't realize it until somebody's burned out, or somebody just is like, I'm sorry, I'm tapping out for the rest of the week. I'm fried. So philosophically, we are, so I don't want to make it sound like we're perfect, because we're far from it. And I'm sure my staff will tell you, like, it doesn't always go that way. But that is the mindset that we have. That's what we want to do, defaults to. And if we fall short of that, then we'll just try to do a little bit better next time. But really, one of the things about sort of, when you look at the project management part of creative operations, or how we get things done. I mean, there's a reason why that I've sort of glommed onto this creative operations concept, is because there's this project management is this term, sort of like, we're not putting widgets together on an assembly line. There's a human element in everything we do. Anybody who's put together a production schedule will be like, we're not doing a meeting that requires a lot of preparation on a Monday morning. I'm not going to do a meeting that requires a lot of engagement on a Friday afternoon. We need approval from the CEO, and he works out over lunch, and he's generally in a better mood after lunch. So we're gonna get this in front of them then. And so there's a human element in how you put together the work, and so your schedules, and you don't schedule things between Christmas and New Year that requires any heavy lifting, because it's going to be really hard. So that human element, you can have all the data you want in the world, but I think you also sometimes just have to trust your instincts and your gut sometimes, that that's not going to be a very productive way to handle something. And you just, if you try to ignore the human side of things, it's going to end up costing you at some point.
Yeah, and along those lines, where do you think the hybrid workforce is going in 2023, as far as, do you think it's beneficial to offer that kind of flexibility to teams? Do you see a greater benefit of having in-person collaboration? What's your stance on that shift in, where people are working and how people are working?
Right. It feels like one of those, like, people are either on one side or the other. You have a lot of folks are like, I miss going into the office, and that human contact is what drives me. And for us as an organization, even when we will, the business center used to be right in a portion of the hospital for us for a while, and then we moved out to a kind of a offsite location a few miles away from the hospital. So we're not seeing that every day. And I know when we went to that model initially years ago, people didn't like the fact that we didn't get to see the patients. We didn't get to see the interactions, the stuff that really drives you and makes you, feel like that you're a part of the mission. We lose that a little, we lost that a little bit. And so, we always made an effort to try to meet there when we could, and to do as much of the work as possible as we could over at the hospitals. And now it's a similar thing with this hybrid workforce. If you really want to feel engaged and part of the mission, it helps to be around other people. But there's others that that working from home is the greatest thing that has ever really happened in their career. The flexibility that it allows them makes them better employees, makes them better at their job. So I think we've gone, my particular team, we're fully remote. And so we have to sort of manufacture our in-person meetings, and we try to do that on a regular basis. But I think that it's, the hybrid is here to stay. There were some companies that said they weren't going to go back, and they went back. So I'll be curious if more companies sort of change their mind and have people coming in more often. But I do think it's going to continue to be the way things work. We just figured out that there's so many efficiencies that can be gained from being hybrid that I have a hard time thinking that we're going to go back totally.
Yeah, sure. And I love that, meeting the people where they are, seeing your team as humans first, and, employees and colleagues, and setting them up to be successful as best you can, while still obviously, elevating the organization. Okay, we've got just a couple minutes left. There are kind of two more tactical questions that we had in our queue. The top goes back to when we were talking about your organization of one project that could be housing multiple deliverables inside of it. They are curious, and this is coming from a traffic manager, how difficult it is for you to keep track of the completions versus the open deliverables when you're only using like one project status. Are you using custom statuses, or how are you clearly communicating what's open, what's left to be done using the tools?
Right. So that's a super good question. So within a project, obviously you can do your group, you can add groups, and then have a project essentially becomes a task for us. And so in that sense, we can track it. We don't have it quite figured out, because some people will just put as a task, social post. Well, that's not really a task, right? That's a deliverable. And so you can see whether that's been done or not. And so what we're trying to use is the groups. And so the group will be the project, and it would be like, print ad for a sponsorship. And then we still have all of our steps in there that we would follow for a regular print ad. All the tasks would still be in there. So in that sense, we can still monitor, how things are going from the task level. But it is a little bit of a manual process where you do need a little bit of project management support to be checking in on some of those projects and really following up with them. So we haven't completely cracked the code on that, but that's the way that we've found the most success.
Great. And then our next question, here we go. Now this would be dependent on what type of maybe reports you're looking at, what objective you're trying to reach when running reports. But we have an attendee who's curious if you have any favorite go-to filters or columns that you are just regularly pulling into your reporting.
So the one that we did add, there's really two that we added, were custom fields. And for anybody who doesn't use custom fields, they're really easy to do. I say that because I just send it to Sarah and we suddenly have a custom field. But I do run the reports on the custom fields. I do a lot of I get kind of freaked out about projects that are stuck somewhere in the system. So this is a little bit of a manual process, but I do a lot of filtering where I pull up all the projects, and then maybe I filter them by a person, or filter them by a team, and then I get a shortened report that comes up, and I can just kind of go visually just check to see, what their deadlines were and where they were at. And so we do a lot of cleanup to make sure that things that are stuck in the system get unstuck. Because again, we're at our organization, somebody might have an idea for something that they want done, and they send it to marketing, and then they go do their real job for 3 weeks, and maybe it got lost on our side, and nobody followed up with them, and they think something's happening with it, and all of a sudden 3 weeks later nothing has happened on it. And so we just want to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen. So I pull a lot of reports that are just static, like, are they in progress? If something is not in progress, why isn't it in progress? And same with requests. If something has been submitted and it's not accepted, why hasn't it been accepted? So those are probably the 2 most common reports that I would be running.
That's great. That's really helpful. Well, we are down to our last 4 minutes. So Pete, I will ask one final question. What are you looking forward to most in 2023?
Well, I do. I hate to go back to the new normal, but I do think that, we are in a position where we, in the old normal, we were still working on process. We were still trying to make this a better tool. We were trying to get all of the pieces in place. And now I think this is the fun stuff where it's actually, we start having people, we've been sort of testing it. Some things work, some things haven't worked. We feel like we're pretty close right now. And so we're kind of relaunching. We're going to do a relaunch probably in sometime in February, where we relaunch it to the organization for the way that we've got a structure. We've got new forms, we've got new templates, we've got this triage stage. So we're just really excited about the fact that we're able to bring what we think is kind of this polished product that we've been working on for a while. And so advice to anybody else, depending, I know some people have been in Lytho longer than others, but this has been a few years for us that we've been chipping away at it. It gets better all the time. And so I think that there just needs to be some patience, that you're not going to just get the tool, plug it in and bam, it's going to work for all of your needs. And so, but we are at a point now where we're feeling like we're going to really see the fruits of all of our labor.
Oh, I love hearing that. Great. I can't wait to partner with you, continue to grow. Well, Pete, thank you so much for joining this conversation today. Again, could not appreciate your time and your insights more. You have been and continue to be just such an excellent partner to Lytho. So thank you for bringing your expertise to our attendees today and sharing your time with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course, yes. And for our attendees, I mentioned at the top of the call that we will share a recording of this webinar once we have all of our ducks in a row. Thankfully, that's not up to me, as we have already identified some of my shortcomings when it comes to webinar management. But our more than capable team will get that out into our registrants soon. We also, if you're interested in looking at that creative operation report series that we launched in 2022, those quarterly reports are on our website at lytho.com under resources. You can click on the reports tab. And then if you're interested in learning more about creative operations, we also have some really great information about creative operations that is on our website, again, lytho.com, and that's under the products. Resources drop down. So under the resources, you can learn about creative operations and then dig into those reports. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that you had a nice time. We hope to see you again at a future event. If you have any questions about the content we covered today, reach out to your customer success manager or to the Lytho success or support team. We'd be happy to continue this conversation. Pete, thank you again.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.